Hello, my Bill 1000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with another Coffeehouse Crime. This one is titled When a Killer is Allowed to Murder Again. Now, this was actually suggested to me by a subscriber. I had just put up a video last Thursday. Yeah, last Thursday. And this one here, I guess, should have came first. She didn't say that, but I'm guessing that because in the video I remember him saying, go back and check my other story. And she actually told me the name of the other story, so we are going to check that out right here, right now. Oh, yeah. I'm excited. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Go ahead, turn them lights down low. Put on something comfy, couple, something special. Let's get angry for all the right reasons.
After graduating from high school, Natalee Holloway and her class travelled to the Caribbean Island of Aruba for a week of partying. But on their final night of celebrating, no one expected this bright young woman to suddenly vanish. Natalee never made it to the airport, with her absence quickly gripping the island of Aruba and all of those back home. The spotlight would eventually find itself over one particular suspect, but it would take more than 10 years to get any justice, coming at the cost of years of frustration and even a second murder. This video looks at the terrible actions of Joran van der Sloot, the weight that Natalee's family had to carry for so many years, and sets us up for our next video.
Now, if I can remember, I will link the video I did last week over there. All right, up there, that corner, right, that corner, right there. I think, maybe, possibly. Just
To be released.
I smash her head in with it completely.
Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're looking at the now solved case of Natalee Holloway. Natalee's case made headlines all across the world for many years after her disappearance, and now finally, after more than a decade, we finally have closure. Now, not only is this story complex, but it also covers multiple murders, and so with that in mind, I've decided to split it into two separate videos to give both victims the respect they deserve. With that said, the next one's out in a few days.
now, I have done that video. If I knew, I would have done this one first. We kind of know how it ends, but it's the journey there, right?
By the way, if you like true crime, strange or darkly fascinating stories, then welcome to Coffeehouse Crime. I post twice a week here, and I'd love it if you could subscribe. And also, welcome to all.
Bro, I'm gonna put it to you like this. You wanna know something? I had my own coffee cup design just so I could have that special cup of coffee for your videos, bro. And if you guys want that special cup of coffee, links in the description. Go grab you one. You can get in multiple colors.
Autumn. The weather outside is colder, everything feels cozier, and apparently everyone with a leaf blower is right outside my studio. But it does make great weather for
Yes. The leaf blower on this side, chainsaw on that side, and a jackass over there.
hot coffee, so if you haven't checked out Classified yet, please take a look.
No, I actually really like the people over there. They are noisy though. They sell Amish made buildings, and whenever they get them back, they'll go in and fix them. And oh my God, it's like living next to a factory sometimes. It's awful, fucking awful.
Cheers. Anyway, with all of that said, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat, and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Natalee Holloway. Here's a new place for Coffeehouse Crime. Welcome to Aruba, folks. Located in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, Aruba is an exotic island with a lot of charm and intrigue. One thing that may surprise you, because it certainly surprised me, is that this island is actually a constituent country to the Netherlands. Now, apparently, most Arubans can speak at least 4 languages. They enjoy a vibrant lifestyle and even have their own brewery. And although it may be relatively small, it's one that adequately serves the tiny island. Another fun fact is that Aruba has the lowest crime rate in the entire of the Caribbean, which probably contributes to making this story almost entirely unbelievable. Before we find ourselves on this island though, we must first travel.
I'm sorry. Every time I hear someone say Aruba, Jamaica, or any of that, I instantly start singing Beach Boys. I don't know why. I have issues.
2,000 miles northwest to the state of Tennessee, and it's here that we could find the young woman Natalee Holloway. Born on October the 21st, 1986 to her parents Dave and Elizabeth, Natalee was raised in Memphis, Tennessee. Things remained peaceful for the first few years of her life, but sadly, at the age of 7, her mother and father split up. Despite the divorce, she and her younger brother Matthew maintained a close relationship with both sides of their family, and although they were primarily raised by their mother, they saw their father as often as they could. It was 3 years after the divorce, in 1996, that Elizabeth met a prominent businessman from Alabama named George Twitty. Known as a wealthy Southern gentleman, Elizabeth was immediately smitten by him. And, perhaps no surprise, the two soon married afterward. With both children by her side, Elizabeth moved to the wealthy suburb of Mountain Brook located in Alabama, where Natalee and Matthew would enroll into their local school. And with both of them being bright and friendly, they quickly fit into their new surroundings. Taking after her mother, Natalee was the definition of a Southern belle. With bright eyes, blonde hair, and a glowing smile, everyone who met her was awestruck. She was friendly and talkative, took the time to know everyone that she met, and by the time she graduated in the year 2005, was very popular and well-liked. As a model student and a member of the...
And what is our rule with Coffeehouse Crime? This is way too fucking sweet. Now, we do know she dies horrifically. We already know that. Because, you know, I'm stupid and I did video 2 first.
National Honor Society, she was also in the dance class and various other activities. Now, as many of you will know, university in America can be extremely expensive. Students often incur hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, especially in lengthy programs such as medical school. But despite having the wealth from her stepfather to support her education, Natalee actually had it covered by securing multiple scholarships. Scheduled to attend the University of Alabama on a full ride, Natalee had her whole life in front of her. However, before attending university, she was given one unique opportunity. Her high school offered her a class trip to the Caribbean Island of Aruba to help celebrate their achievements. Now, many parents thought that, on the surface, this seemed like the perfect way for students to celebrate their graduation. I mean, this was a very big achievement.
Sounds fucking amazing,
and not only
bro.
would the parents have some time away from their children, but it would help let off some steam before they started university. But what many didn't realize was that, instead of a wholesome school-guided excursion, this trip was, in reality, a drinking and gambling-filled joyride. In Aruba, the legal age limit for drinking and gambling is 18 years old.
A bunch of kids about ready to graduate. They knew. It was already known what was happening, bro. You don't have now.
Which is in stark contrast to the 21-year-old age limit in the States. And while this difference may not seem like a big deal to those of us in Europe and Australia, in America, the drinking culture is very strictly defined by its age limit. Now, the opportunity for a trip to Aruba without any supervision.
Yeah, because by golly, you can't drink a beer until you're 21. You can't smoke a cigarette until you're 21, but you can sign up and go die at the age of 18. We have our priorities straight, bro.
From their parents was a very exciting prospect for graduates. Natalee was one of those people looking forward to drinking legally for once. And on a tropical island to boot. Well, imagine the immense feeling of freedom. And so, after asking her father to help fund the vacation and getting the green light from her mother, she was good to go. On Thursday, May the 26th of 2005, just a few days after her high school graduation, Natalee, alongside more than 120 fellow graduates, arrived in Aruba for an all-inclusive 5-day celebration. Chaperones made sure that the students were staying safe. But that being said, those students outnumbered them 17-1. So yeah, it was no surprise that it was almost impossible to keep tabs on every graduate on the island. The result was an almost unencumbered and unmonitored holiday, fueled by parties, alcohol, and everything else that you could imagine. Cocktails were flowing, the music was booming, and the sun was blisteringly hot. With all
Spring
chaperones
break.
completely
Gotcha.
overwhelmed, they made it their job to catch up with all students daily to ensure that they were doing well, at least through the various hangovers. Natalee herself was included in this group, by the way. According to other students, she was seen drinking pretty much all day every day. Friends reported that she was often waking up and starting the morning with cocktails, becoming so hungover that she missed breakfast twice in a row. To illustrate the complete chaos here, the owners of the Holiday Inn where the group was staying told the chaperones that if they returned the following year, they were not welcome back at the hotel. And unfortunately, this sets the stage for our case today. A large group of adults partying both day and night with minimal supervision. What could possibly go wrong? On the last full day of their holiday, all students made it their mission to get their final party in before returning home.
Yeah.
Natalee herself had just met a 17-year-old Dutch national named Joran van der Sloot, and, being Dutch, lived in the nearby town called Noord. The two started chatting and seemed to be enjoying each other's company. Which is probably no surprise why, later on, Natalee agreed to meet him for her last evening on the island. Later that evening, Joran and Natalee met at the popular Carlos and Charlie's bar in Oranjestad. The two shared several drinks and danced together, only stopping when the bar closed at 1 AM. As people gathered their belongings to leave the club, Natalee's friends noticed that she was preparing to hop into a car with Joran and his two friends. These friends named as Deepak and Satish Kalpo. Somewhat concerned, her friends asked her what her plan was and where she was going. In Natalee's
D-bag?
mind, she
His
was
name
getting
was
a ride back
D-bag?
to her hotel to get a much-needed night's sleep before heading home. It is true, she could have gone back with her friends, but apparently this lift would have gotten her home faster. And sadly, as a result, this would be the last time that her friends would ever see her alive again. Scheduled to fly home the following day, Natalee was still missing after sunrise. At first, her friends assumed that she may have spent the night with Joran, but as the hours passed and their flight time approached, she was still nowhere to be found. And with her packed luggage and passport still in her room at the Holiday Inn, none of her friends or teachers could get in contact with her. At this point, they understandably all began to panic. Natalee was known to be responsible, always on time, and at the right place when she needed to be. To say it was worrying that she was now missing after a night out and without any explanation whatsoever was a massive understatement.
That's no bueno,
Aruban
bruh.
authorities
No
were notified
bueno.
of the missing girl, and as her classmates boarded the plane and left without her, the authorities began to search the island, looking for any signs or clues. As soon as her parents were notified, they too understandably began to worry, with Natalee's mother and stepfather flying out to the island via a private jet. Their daughter was now lost in a foreign country, and tragically, that was the very best outcome. At worst, it didn't even bear thinking about. But despite the local authorities knowing that the girl was now missing, they had made little effort so far in locating her. In fact, in the hours after her reported disappearance, they didn't do much more than search the areas she was last seen. Desperate for more information, Elizabeth and George questioned hotel staff and other holidaymakers in the area, hoping that someone could help them. Speaking with anyone who would talk to them, their investigation ultimately guided them along Natalee's final steps the night before. After the hotel, they went to check out the bar Natalee was last seen at, of course being Carlos and Charlie's. It was there that they learned that their daughter had left the night prior with a young Dutch national, and with pretty good investigation skills, they would even discover his name, that being Joran van der Sloot. After eventually being located, Joran was questioned about Natalee's disappearance, and although he did seem to be calm, he did admit that he left the bar with her and two other friends. He also claimed that the four of them then drove to a lighthouse and spent around about an hour together, before going back to the Holiday Inn and saying goodbye to Natalee. Taking her parents back to the hotel, Joran said he would then go find the security guard who saw Natalee last night. However, conveniently enough, that guard was nowhere to be found. By now though, Natalee's case had captured the island's attention, and although she was not officially a missing person yet, more than 100 people were searching right across the island. Safe to say, the details behind her sudden disappearance were enough to concern anyone who learned of them, so it was no surprise to see the community band together.
And all that time, everyone's looking for her. The family's losing their fucking mind. This piece of shit's just... Ugh.
For the next 4 days, ragtag teams of locals and tourists checked every corner of the island, hoping and praying to find her merely trapped or stranded, but in good health otherwise. On June the 5th, the authorities detained several corrupt security guards, hoping for a lead. Sadly though, it seemed they were barking up the wrong tree, as all of those guards were released only 8 days later. As the next step in their efforts, the police interrogated Joran's father, who, no surprise, remained silent throughout the interview. A local DJ also claimed to know something, but his information was proven to be false. And with both ventures seeming fruitless, both men were eventually...
Was it just me, or could you see that lady's boulder holder through her shirt? You probably shouldn't take pictures in shirts that you can see through, bruh.
let go.
5 police in Aruba have made a new arrest in connection with the disappearance of Mountain Brook teenager Natalee Holloway. They've arrested the father of a Dutch teen who's been in custody for 2 weeks. The wife of Paul Vandersloot says her husband was just picked up by police. Anita Vandersloot says she thought her family was innocent. Now she, quote, doesn't know what to think. Mrs. Vandersloot says she believes her son is being unfairly targeted simply because he was one of the last people to see Natalee Holloway. Anita Vandersloot says her son, Joran, is mentally strong, but she also thinks the interrogations would have broken him down by now if he knew anything. The Dutch teen's mother says a meeting with Holloway's mother was very emotional, and she can't understand why Holloway thinks Joran and the others being detained know more than they've already told investigators. Vandersloot says her son is just an ordinary teenager who is getting ready to go to college in the U.S. She says, why would a boy with a normal life, quote, do something wrong to a girl he had just met?
Now, you would think that the authorities would be questioning our main suspects, of course that being the 3 men that were last seen with Natalee. But in reality, it took them 9 days to bring any of them in for questioning.
Why?
And this was only after mounting pressure from Natalee's family and government officials. And this is precisely why time is always of the essence in these cases.
Yes.
Because by the time they arrested these 3 men,
I've watched the first 48 hours, bro. That first 2 days is very fucking important.
they had enough time to formulate their story. The 2 Calpo brothers, who were last seen in the car with both Joran and Natalee, told the authorities that they'd dropped them off at the beach before then returning home. In his separate interview, Joran claimed the exact same thing. However, this new story differed from the one he gave to Natalee's parents. In this new story, he claimed that shortly after arriving, he returned home, leaving Natalee alone on the beach. So, now we have a man who we know was with Natalee on the night she disappeared, was clearly into her, and had changed his story. Things just weren't adding up here.
Shady. Shady as shit, bruh.
For
Hate
over a
this
month, the
motherfucker.
Calper brothers and Joran Vandersloot were held by Aruban police as the investigation continued. On July the 4th, an Aruban judge ordered the release of Deepak and Satish, but demanded that Joran remained in custody and was held for at least another 60 days. Without any new information or leads, Natalee's family and various search teams were beginning to grow desperate. Imagine spending over a month on a foreign island, frantically searching for your child who was now missing for several weeks. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Sometimes silence is the loudest sound. Her absence was agonizing for all of those who loved her, and to add to the pain, no fresh evidence could be found. In what seemed to be a miracle break in the case, on July the 17th, search teams found a piece of duct tape on Aruba's northeast coast, not far from Nord, which conveniently is the town where Joran lived. And simultaneously, while this happened, both Deepak and Satish were re-detained. The tape appeared to have blonde strands of hair attached to it, and many believed that those hairs may have belonged to Natalee. But after sending the evidence for forensic testing, the sample returned with a negative match, therefore throwing the Holloway family back into despair. Things took a turn for the worse when, only 2 weeks later, both Joran and the brothers were officially released from custody, frustratingly leaving them free to roam the island and afar once again. With the release of all primary suspects and no new leads, the investigation had unfortunately ground to a halt. What was once a fast-paced and desperate search had now shifted into a...
Yeah, see, when we watched the second video, I know this one is about this poor young lady's murder, and the other one was about the other poor young lady's murder. But I mean, don't get me wrong, by the end of the other video, I was dead set on this dude being the biggest piece of shit I ever seen. I didn't think I would think he was more of a bigger piece of shit just by watching this one, but I truly believe this dude is the epitome of a walking turd.
Slowly churning mess of arrests, lies, and even at one point, extortion. Weeks turned into months, and as those months extended into 2006, Joran had firmly remained in the public spotlight. But in March 2006, 10 months after Natalee's disappearance, Joran was given the chance to tell his side of the story through an interview with Fox News. Here, he detailed the night Natalee disappeared, and further claimed that he had left her on the beach before returning home. And as for some of the more peculiar details, well, listen for yourself.
How do you think you've been portrayed in all this?
I think I've been portrayed unfairly. I think it's about time that people get to see the other side of the story.
Are you ready to tell the truth?
Yeah.
Did you kill Natalee Holloway?
No.
Did you harm Natalee Holloway?
No.
And why should you be believed after all the lying that you've done in this situation?
There's absolutely no reason to believe me.
This so-called tell-all interview did nothing to change the public opinion on Joran. To Natalee's family and the rest of the islanders, he was definitely hiding something. Later in December that year, Natalee's parents turned their focus to the other two men in this case, hoping they would know something about their daughter. And so, in hopes of getting fresh information from Deepak or Satish, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against them. However, despite feeling confident, they were let down only 6 months later when the judge dismissed the lawsuit. Much of the same continued throughout the year of 2007. Natalee's parents were desperate for new progress, and although our three main suspects were rearrested, they would then be released only 1 month later. None of the boys were changing their stories, and time seemed to be eroding people's hopes of finding any fresh evidence. By 2008, the police in Aruba had enough. Nothing new had cropped up in the last year and a half, and sadly, it was at this point that the island's chief prosecutor, Hans Moss, declared the case closed. This was much to the dismay of Natalee's parents. Her mother, filled with grief, made a public statement to say that she was now convinced she would never see her daughter alive again. However, while this was happening and halfway across the world, a savvy reporter was presented with a rather unique opportunity, that being the chance to trap Joran van der Sloot in an undercover sting operation. Alongside one of Joran's new friends, Dutch reporter Peter de Vries was tasked by the authorities to set him up, earn his trust, and hopefully extract a confession out of Joran. But if executed properly, it could be precisely what they needed to confirm his involvement in Natalee's disappearance. And the plan, well, it worked. Joran admitted that once he and Natalee were alone on the beach, she started convulsing. Unfortunately for him though, this confession was recorded by a secret camera. The confession is in Dutch, so there's not much point in playing it, but this is the infamous video that caught him off guard. Unable to revive her, Joran then called a friend and asked him to help with the body. And this supposed friend then told Joran to go home before he then took her body out to the sea. Once this video came to light, the public outcry was absolutely massive. It appeared that the case had now been solved, at least somewhat, and everyone looked to Joran for an immediate response. Of course, Joran insisted that he was lying the entire time, and merely making up a story to impress his new friend, and that nothing, in the end, was factual as he claimed. And so, the frustrating pattern continued. The Holloway family desperately searched for answers, holding out hope while the men who knew what happened remained silent, simultaneously just out of reach of prosecution. Despite Aruba's public prosecutor's office announcing the reopening of the case,
Like, even though I watched the other video, like, I am still angry as fuck right now. Motherfucker needs his pecker ripped off and beat to death with it, bro. I'm just...
After Uryn's video footage was released, the investigation was still in the same state when it was closed, that being ice cold. By 2010, 5 years had passed since Natalee's disappearance. But this was a year that marked a very definite change, and all of this was due to Uryn's ever-increasing depravity. In a surprising yet twisted display of greed, Uryn contacted the Holloway family's lawyer named Kelly to offer the location of their daughter's body in return for $275,000 cash. Uryn demanded $25,000 up front, with the following $250,000 once the body was found. And so, after rapid communication with the family, Kelly responded and agreed, before relaying the information to the FBI. So let's take a moment here to pause and reflect, because I think that's rather important. But this man, who'd already caused so much pain, anger and despair on the family, was now willing to extort them for money. That's just absolutely disgusting. It all makes sense really, because the family was so desperate to find out what happened to Natalee. And of course that money could always be captured back. Taking the family lawyer to his father's house, Uryn claimed that his father had actually buried Natalee's body within the building's foundation, which was now impossible to extract. With this information exchanged, the family lawyer gave Uryn an additional $15,000. And now, with $25,000 in his bank account, Uryn boarded the next flight to Peru. However, the US Department of Justice had been following Uryn's transactions, and of course, they were not planning to let him get away scot-free. And so, on June 3rd, 2010, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud. Later that month, he was officially indicted. But, as we are about to learn, Uryn was in even hotter water in Peru. The date was May 30th, 2010. And in the city of Lima, police were investigating a missing persons report for a young woman who had vanished only a few days prior. Meanwhile, in a nearby hotel, staff were doing routine room cleaning when they suddenly stumbled upon a grisly scene. A maid had walked into the hotel room to find the dead body of a young woman. It was eventually learned that the body belonged to 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez. As it turns out, the room was rented in Uryn Vandersloot's name, but by the time the authorities had figured this out, Uryn was, of course, nowhere to be found. And in a sick coincidence, he had murdered Stephanie on the 5-year anniversary.
I hate that motherfucker so much.
Anniversary of Natalee's disappearance. Officially on the run, he did his very best to evade the authorities in South America. Fleeing Peru, he cut and dyed his hair red, and then made his way to Chile. But this wouldn't last forever, because only 4 days later, our slime bag was spotted taking a taxi in the beach city of Vina del Mar, where, no surprise, he was then promptly arrested. And after being taken back to Lima, he was placed in a high-security prison where he then confessed to the killing.
The bombshell confession came late last night. Under intense questioning, the 22-year-old Uryn reportedly told investigators that he attacked Stephanie Flores. He grabbed her by the neck when she took his laptop, he said, and started reading articles about him on the internet. I did not want to do it, he tearfully admitted. The girl intruded into my private life. She had no right. I confronted her. She was frightened. We argued, and she wanted to get away. I grabbed her by her neck, and I hit her.
Stephanie Ramirez was a student in her 3rd year of business administration when she met Uryn while playing poker, and after wanting to continue playing poker online, she went back with him to his hotel. According to Uryn, he snapped after catching Stephanie snooping through his computer. When confronted, she admitted that she was searching for information that could link him to Natalee, and in his anger, he killed her in cold blood. Following a reasonably laminar trial, Uryn was sentenced to 28 years in prison for the murder of Stephanie Ramirez. He was also ordered to pay 75,000 sol in reparations, the equivalent of $20,000 or 16,000 pounds. And so, despite doing his very best to evade Natalee's murder, it would be a second murder in her name that would eventually catch him. Now, you may have realized that I skimmed over Stephanie's murder, and that was for a very good reason. I plan to share her story and her voice in another video in a few days' time, so be ready for that. We're being brief with the details here for simplicity's sake. But in 2014, Joran married his then girlfriend, 24-year-old Lady Figuero. With the baby now on the way, Joran sat behind bars and reflected on his actions. He knew that, no matter what, he wouldn't get out anytime soon. Set to remain there for the next 26 years, he would then be sent back to the US to serve time for extortion of Natalee's family. And maybe with this in mind, he grew weaker in his determination to maintain his silence over Natalee's death. On May the 10th, 2023, Peruvian officials announced that they were giving Joran over to the US to face charges of wire fraud and extortion related to his 2010 indictment. Legally called a request for temporary surrender, Joran was to be charged on US soil before then being brought back to Peru to serve his Peruvian time. Natalee's mother weighed in with her own opinion too, sharing that, finally, there seemed to be some sense of justice served for her daughter's death. But Joran was not going to make this easy for anyone. Facing the court, he pleaded not guilty to his charges of extortion and wire fraud. And after that, he was then transferred to a county jail where he had more time to think about what lay ahead. I mean, Joran had already started his Peruvian jail time. And now, with the charges before him, he realized that he may have an even lengthier process in America. And so, with all of that in mind, he realized he had to change his attitude. Now, you can probably see where this is going, but after returning to court, Joran was offered to make a plea deal. If Joran were to plead guilty to his charges of extortion and wire fraud, and furthermore give a full confession of what happened to Natalee, then he'd receive only 20 years behind bars, and furthermore be exempt from any future murder charges. And no surprise, he took it. He pleaded guilty and put everything on the table. And the story that he shared between him and Natalee would be just as terrible as you'd expect. Joran claimed that, after hitchhiking a ride from Deepak and Satish, he and Natalee found themselves
Yeah, we didn't get to hear all the fucked up shit. Yay. Now we get to.
alone on the beach. Joran had one thing on his mind under the moon that night. Of course, that being sex. He put on his charm and tried to coerce Natalee. At first, she didn't seem to mind the attention, but after he became pushy, she clarified that she was not interested in anything physical with him. As Joran became more forceful, so did Natalee's resistance. She pushed him off of her, but sadly, Joran became increasingly aggressive. He then kicked her extremely hard in the face, sending her sprawling back onto the sand unconscious. In a fit of rage, he picked up a nearby cinder block before barbarically bringing it down on her head, crushing her skull and ending her life in the process. Joran knew that if he had any chance of getting away with her murder, he couldn't just leave her here. That is when he dragged her into the moonlit ocean and let her body float away. The described scene was intense, and the emotions felt in the courtroom formed a terrible cocktail of grief, rage, sadness, and closure. And despite finally knowing that the daughter would never return home, her family at least finally knew what had happened. And with his terrible confession
That's
now
awful
laid
though,
bare
bro.
for the entire world to hear, Joran van der Sloot was returned to Peru to continue his first of 2 separate sentences.
He has the
I mean, I understand the family finally knows, but my God, that's brutal to hear.
sentence. They're going to let him serve it concurrently. So he's not going to serve any time in an American jail. He's going back to Peru.
Well, he might. And so for folks who might be a little bit confused about, well, why is he here and now going back to Peru? As Sam said, it's because he actually was convicted of killing another young woman. And because that conviction came first, he still has to serve out that prison sentence in Peru. But if for whatever reason, say he got out of prison early in Peru, he would be immediately transferred back to the United States to serve out the rest of the 20-year sentence that he has for killing Natalee.
Joran now sits behind bars in a Peruvian prison, where he is scheduled to be released in the year 2043. After that, he will be flown to an American prison and remain there until 2063. Ultimately, despite their daughter being gone and no official charge for her murder being made, the Holloway family feel satisfied with the justice brought to Joran van der Sloot. After nearly 20 years of suffering, and in the face of uncertainty, Dave and Elizabeth Holloway stood strong and fought for justice for their daughter. And of course, George for his stepdaughter. And now, at the end of their journey, and with her killer behind bars, they may finally find closure through this tragedy, and remember their daughter for who she really was. Natalee was a beautifully bright girl, and a friend to all. And despite her life cruelly ending early, the impact she had on the people around her is remarkable and can still be felt to this day. This is a very wild story when you think about it, with more twists and turns than I can even begin to count. To this day, Natalee's body has never been found, and sadly, it's unlikely to ever be recovered. I think though folks, that just about concludes our case today. As mentioned before, I'll be making a second video.
Yeah, definitely go over and watch that second video. I'm gonna try my damnedest to post it up in the corner over here. I will do my damnedest to remember. All right. I really enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for telling me about this one. I really wish I would have watched this one first and then the second one. Still, the anger is real. Like, it took a whole other person being murdered for this piece of shit to get anything. That's the fucked up thing. Like I said, I really enjoyed today's story. Thank you so much for the suggestion. Like, damn. If you all enjoyed today's story as much as I did, please go down there, hit that thumbs up. While you're down there going over, hit that subscribe button. Become part of Bill 5000 Nation. We do some crazy shit here, bro. And if you want to know when that crazy shit happens, ding that bell. It'll let you know, maybe, sorta, kinda. And if it does let you know, you can jump in on one of my premieres and join me in the live chat. And if you really want to help support the channel, links in the description. Go check out my store. Got some amazing merch. Drop new stuff all the time, bro. All the time. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Oh, good Lord. He should have got so much more time than what he did for everything. Dude's trash, bro.